In a relationship, when is honesty not the best policy? How do you balance what you want versus what you need? And is there something you need to say to your spouse but can't find the right way to say it? If so, then you're in the right place. This is the Lunch with Sandy podcast. With nearly 20 years of marriage under their belts, Terrence and Sandy Jackson discuss a range of topics, provide valuable insights on relationships, and talk about the conversations married couples need to have. So what does lunch have to do with all of this? Well, it's a metaphor for how these conversations originally started. Speaking of conversations, let's get one going. Here's your hosts, Terrence and Sandy.
Welcome to another episode of the Lunch with Sandy podcast. I'm Terrence.
And I'm Sandy.
And as usual, we have the conversations that married couples need to have. And Sandy, today we are going to be having a conversation about the financial realities of being a parent. But before we get into that, we're at that segment of the show that we start with every show where people are waiting with bated breath. For your answer to this very simple question. Sandy, how are you today?
Unmotivated.
Unmotivated. Last week, I told you my realization of the week was motivation without discipline will not get you very far. So you know what you need to do? You need to become more disciplined.
Sure. If you say so. It's rainy. It's one of those things. I'd just rather sit on the couch, do nothing today.
This is where discipline will get you so much further than motivation.
Obviously, it's not what I've done all day, but...
What's not what you've done all day?
Like sat on the couch and did nothing. I got up, I went to church, went food shopping, took Aylin to PetSmart and to Wally World.
Alrighty then.
So I've got quite a bit in, and I made an apple pie. So
wait. Well, the apple pie is not done yet.
It's in the process of baking, but all of
when
my
it's
part
complete
of it,
and it meets my taste standards, then the apple pie will be done.
Yes.
Only then will it be done.
But the major part of constructing the apple pie, at least, is done.
I like how you said constructing the apple pie. That makes it so appetizing. I constructed the apple pie.
Well, it's kind of a pain. You know, you have to core each apple, you have to peel each apple, slice up each apple.
But everything that's worth doing requires hard work. So just know that your hard work, if it tastes the way the last one did, will not go unappreciated. Anyway, before we get too far down the rabbit hole with that apple pie, which I'm sure I'm going to enjoy later, I want to get to our spotlight of the week. And our spotlight of the week actually lines up a little bit with what the conversation is going to be today. For the spotlight of the week, I want to shine the light on my man, Danny Bullock. You remember Danny?
Yes.
So Danny is from Dream Builders, and he has a podcast that he does with someone else, and it's called the Ice Blue Money Podcast. And I had the chance to listen to their first episode last week. And essentially what they do is they provide information on helping people reach their financial goals. So
nice.
It's very important that when you talk about your future and whether it be retirement or what you want to do in so many years that you actually have goals, the Ice Blue Money Podcast and Danny Bullock from Dream Builders gives you the opportunity to gain some insight on some of the things that they think that you should be doing to help prepare for that time. Now, we got that out of the way. Let's talk about the joyous things, or one of the most joyous things in the world, your children.
That's going to be a sarcastic comment.
Well, you should have, because I looked at you and for half a second I thought I was going to get something and I didn't get anything. But, you know, having children can be one of the most
eaters.
Well, listen, we'll get to that in a second. But having children can be one of the most rewarding experiences. I don't know why it was so hard for me to get that out. It's not because it's not true, because it actually is true. But at the same time, it's one of the most significant decisions that you'll make in your life when you decide to actually have children. So with all the joy and all the reward that comes with having children, there are some challenges. And one of the biggest ones is, for those of you who have not realized this yet, is there can be a price tag. And most of the time there's a price tag associated with having children.
Savings killers.
Well, it's it's just when you're considering having children, it's important that, you plan for the financial responsibility that comes along with having children. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about that. And I want to talk about that from 3 different aspects. And I'll name the 3 and then we'll get into them. But first, I want to talk about budgeting for that initial investment. And you notice I said that initial investment because it's an investment. I'm not going to look at it as I'm trying to. What was the phrase that you just used?
Savings killer.
Savings killer. We're going to talk about budgeting for that initial investment. Then we're going to talk about childcare and educational costs. And then we're going to talk about that last piece, but I phrased it a little bit differently. It's about how all of this affects your financial goals and how do you get to an area where you have to understand that you got to compromise now or adapt because of this new, level that's been presented to you.
Yeah. Which is funny because even sometimes when Danielle and I are trying to schedule like a workout or something, and it's always work or kids that get in the way. And I'm like, working kids ruin everything.
Listen, I don't know why. And it seems like I'm saying this every episode, but you always tend to go to the dark side. Listen, if you were in Star Wars, you would definitely be,
most definitely.
You would definitely be, I don't know if you would be Darth Vader, but you'd be pretty close.
Yeah, I struggle.
All right.
Struggle balancing both sides. Hence, when,
Enough trying to bring Sandy to the light, because I don't know if we're going to be able to do it in one episode. Apparently not 2 episodes. It may take 10 or 15, and although we're probably on episode 35, 36, 37, somewhere around there, we will get her to come over to see the light eventually.
It's never going to happen.
So let's talk about that initial investment, right?
Okay.
Before you even become a parent, before you officially become a parent, there are a host of expenses and costs that you have to take into consideration, right?
You mean once you find out that you're pregnant?
Once you find out that you're pregnant, yes.
Yes.
There's prenatal costs and
lots of them.
And hopefully you have good insurance that will handle some of these, but you still have co-pays and things like that.
Well, yeah. Well, you're right. Even with good insurance, sometimes things come up. If you think about it, for Ayla, right? Had to go weekly to the hospital.
Yeah, well, we're not going to get too...
Well, I mean, to get shots. And that was a copay every single time because the doctor wouldn't do it, right? Like they didn't do the shots. You had to go to the emergency room for them. And while it wasn't an emergency room copay, it was still, I think, a doctor office visit.
Yeah. I mean...
And that was weekly. And that was the entire pregnancy.
Yes. So your financial landscape changes right off the bat because you have, as you said, there's doctor's visits. You got to go in for ultrasounds and your insurance may cover that. But you got to take into account that, okay, well, in order to make all these appointments and get to them, taking time out of work and hopefully again, from the perspective of where you work, you have the time and all those things, but it starts to add up.
Well, and it's not even time for doctor's visits. I've always been blessed. I haven't gotten sick when I was pregnant, but there are some women that, oh goodness, poor things. They're sick every day in the beginning, and think about it, like who wants to go to work like that? So even sick time right off the bat, you're only a couple months deep at that point. So
there's there are a few things that, you have to keep in mind, you have to consider when you're thinking about how you're going to plan from a financial perspective, not just from a financial perspective, but overall, because you got to think about, okay, well, what are you going to do for early childcare? And when I say early childcare, hopefully, where you work, you have a good program for maternity or paternity leave.
Yes.
But there are some early costs that are associated with having a child besides childcare, once the child is born, you got to think about diapers and formula and a host of other things.
Babies come with things too.
Well, I mean, they come with things. What do you mean they come with things?
Not that they come with them. They don't actually come with anything. But I just remember how much stuff like you have for a baby.
Yeah. Well, listen.
You need the high chair. You need the car seat.
All right.
You need the play
bed.
Yes. Like all these big bulky toys.
Well, to the toys and the expenses that come along with those toys. But
for these tiny little human beings, there's a lot of stuff that is used for them.
But we've gone through it a number of times. And so from the perspective of how to prepare, there are some things that everyone should keep in mind when they're planning on having a child, right?
Even preparing, like space and room.
Yes.
You know, you might even have to do some home improvements.
Yeah. Other things to keep in mind, first and foremost, you got to start, if you're not doing so, you got to start tracking your expenses.
Yes.
Because again, from a financial perspective, the landscape has just changed. Mm-hmm. You know, you need to make sure that you set financial goals.
Yep.
And more importantly, stick to those goals.
Yeah. And
when I say setting financial goals, obviously that comes along with making sure that you actually have a budget.
Yes. Budget is, I feel like that's what got us through most of the times. We had a very strict budget.
Yeah. Well, having a budget and sticking to that budget is very important. And the other thing that you need to consider, and you know, we went through this, but when you're going to have a child, you have to consider, you know, your career choice and how that and the impact that may or may not have on the family and the financial stability of that family. Because your world is going to change. Yeah. It's one thing if it's just two individuals and they're used to working particular schedules and those schedules are off or whatever. But now when you have a child and you take into account all of the costs that can come along with that, you have to think about what you're doing as a career. Because let's say, for instance, we'll use you as an example when you were working third shift or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And if you have someone working third shift, you have someone working first shift. I mean, at some point, the kids got to be somewhere, or the kids were actually somewhere. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of different aspects, actually, that you have to think about with career choices. Like, to your point, so do you work different shifts? You know, one person home with the child while the other parent is working, and then the other parent, you know, they flip-flop, goes to work, and the other one's home. You know, but career choices isn't just about the money, like how much you're bringing home either. It's all the benefits that kind of come along with it.
Oh, 100%.
Do you get extra sick time? Do you have flexibility in your work schedule? Like, there's so many different factors that even go into it. You can't just like look at two numbers on a piece of paper for two different jobs and be like, oh yeah, I'm taking the one that pays me the most.
Yeah. And when I'm talking about the career, the career path and career choice, I'm specifically talking about, okay, well, you have to make sure that from the perspective of you're taking into account now that you're going to have a child, a little, the child is going to start out as a baby, and there's going to be an extreme amount of care that you have to provide for the child. Yeah. You now need to make sure that becomes a major focus of what it is that you're actually doing, and all the decisions that you make, you have to take that into consideration.
No, for sure. Even commuting, 1 hour commute to and from work would not cut it anymore. You know, there's so many ways to look at it and think about things. It can feel overwhelming at times.
Yeah. So now you have a child.
Yay.
Yeah.
Bundle of joy.
You have a child. You've gotten past those initial phases, and now you're at that point where you're ready to return to work. And whether let me rephrase that. You have to return. You have to return to work. And once you return back to work and you're getting to the point where the child is getting older, now there's a whole nother set of financial responsibilities that are going to come your way. Mm-hmm. Right? Two of the most significant costs of raising kids are childcare and education.
Yep. So
I mean,
childcare, we always used to call the girls our second mortgage.
Yeah, listen, I remember, when you have having one
It's bad enough.
is bad enough. Having two, and now when you think about it from this perspective, childcare was expensive going way back when we had Lexi and Shayna and childcare. Today, I could only imagine with inflation and things like that.
It might be the mortgage payment instead of the second mortgage payment.
Well, childcare, early childcare is the most substantial expense that a parent can have. Mm-hmm. Outside of, depending
I
on.
would say the first couple of years is always the hardest financially, because everything is just expensive, because you get the diapers, you get the child care, which, sometimes it becomes a little cheaper as they get older, but like off the bat. And then if you're using formula, forget it. That costs like an arm and a leg too now.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
it always has.
It always
more
has.
Now.
Well, now, the challenge, especially since COVID, remember there was a shortage.
Yes. And
it was very hard to get a hold of formula or anything like that.
Yep. So, yeah. I think it does get a little cheaper, at least from that respect. But then as the kid also gets older, then they also want to do other things.
Yeah.
Right now it's sports. It's dance classes. It's all other things that kids want to now do that really aren't, we'll call it childcare expenses or anything.
Well, certainly as they start to get older. Right. And just before I jump to that, because I'm going to get to that in a second, but just go back to the child care for a second.
Okay.
Parents actually have to make a decision on what's best for the family when you start talking about child care. And what I mean by that is at some point it might be more feasible or more financially responsible for one parent to be home with the child, depending on what you're actually paying for childcare. And that's something that as a family, I think that, parents are going to have to actually consider now to what you're getting to, right? Mm-hmm. When you start talking about the child starts to grow up and develop and they start getting involved in all the extracurricular activities. Now, when Lexi and Shayna were younger, it wasn't that bad. But now...
now it's insane.
It's insane. I don't even think insane is the word for it. When you think about the cost of all of these camps and all these leagues that these kids are a part of, I was talking to Court, and this was when we went back to lunch, and he was telling me how much it costs for his daughters to be in this soccer league, and it was astronomical. Not just the cost of to be in it, but the travel expenses and all of those things.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think we were fortunate with the older girls that there was better rec programs at the time. I don't know if those programs really, I know that they still exist, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if they're the same caliber that they were, because there was less travel teams back then. Now I feel like there's more travel teams.
I think for the most part, it's all travel teams. And I think the rec programs were fine. I think the misconception that a lot of parents have is that their kid's going to grow up and play professional sports. And I don't say that to deter anyone, but the fact of the matter is that it's a very small percentage of kids who actually go on to actually play professional sports. So from the perspective of looking at those things, and I guess before I even get to trying to offer some solutions on how to offset some of those things, let's talk about education for a second. And I think that one of the easiest things and one of the simplest things, and I think that everyone should be doing from the perspective of planning for your child's education, is opening up the 529 accounts.
Yeah. And some states are different. Definitely here in Rhode Island, I think it's a good plan, but
Listen, a plan is better than no plan.
Yeah.
And I think...
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 529.
Oh, well,
it has to be some type of savings type of account or an investment account. It needs to be something that is going to generate you money.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some things that parents could possibly do or should be considering when early on when they have a child. And some of these things that, we waited some time on. Nothing should be stopping you from actually getting insurance, and not just for yourself.
Yes. But
opening up insurance, an insurance plan for, and there are particular types of insurance that you can get for young children, not with, and I'm not trying to be dark. I'm not trying to go to the sandy side, but insurance that you can then turn into, and I saw a podcast on this that you can actually turn into
a whole life plan.
Yeah. You can turn into actual financial, what's the right word? From a financial perspective, you can then utilize that money for something necessary for the child down the road. You should be doing that. And listen, start estate planning from the very, very beginning. I'm not sure why people wait so long for that, but the longer you wait, the more opportunity that you actually miss out on. And I say opportunity because, again, if you look at it from the perspective of saying, okay, when I start to think about all the possibilities that can come up from an expense perspective, how prepared am I going to be? Now, you were talking about the leagues and you were talking about all that extra stuff. It's never too early to start planning for that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. So, right, the more time that you have, the better off you're going to be. The more time that you have, you can actually start saving, like, monetarily less. That will then compile over time.
Yep.
Versus if you wait till the last minute. Like, at that point, you've not taking any advantage of any type of investment. So all of that money is going to just have to come straight out of pocket. You know what I mean? So if I have $100 today and I, make whatever it is percentage on it, like that will just naturally, right, progress over time. Versus if I wait till they're 15, that $100 ain't going to take me very far.
And listen, if you wait till they're 15, still do something.
Right.
Because something's better than nothing.
Yes.
And I do know that, sometimes I don't want to say things slip people's mind, but sometimes you're not thinking about these things and then they pop up and it's like, hey, you need to plan for this. Because, you talked about the extracurricular activities. Think about this. At some point, your kid's going to want a car.
Yeah. And
I believe in having kids work so they understand the value of the dollar, but you want to be able to do as much for your kids as you possibly can. And saving now or saving when they're very young presents you with the opportunity to do more of that, because you might not be able to do everything, but it'll give you a leg up and put you in a position where you can do more than if you didn't do anything at all. To
the whole point, like, whatever you can do for your child is better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing. But even from the education perspective, we live in a good town with a good school system, but not everybody's as fortunate as us.
Exactly.
Sometimes the education expenses start much younger than just even college. You might be looking at elementary school, middle school, high school. Like, there's just different times where your expense could actually start sooner than, I'll wait to save for college. Like, sometimes situations happen.
So here's what should happen. You find out you're pregnant, you go to a financial advisor.
Right away.
Right away. That's what you do.
Second appointment.
Step 1, step 2. Exactly. Listen, between you find out between your next appointment, you go to the financial advisor or whatever, your accountant, financial advisor, whoever. That's step 2 before you go to that second appointment. Get that stuff started.
Well, and not for nothing, even think about like birthdays and things of that nature. Like, I know everybody wants to get the kid a gift, a toy to make them happy.
True.
But how many toys do they really need? sometimes you just need to tell friends and family, like, hey, can you just give me money or put it right directly into their account, whatever it is. Because, even go old school savings bonds.
Yeah, do they still do saving bonds?
Yes, they do.
Saving bonds?
I don't think they're paper anymore, but they still do. I mean, like, there's so many alternatives.
Are there paper saving bonds sitting around here somewhere?
I can either confirm or deny that.
I think they are.
Yeah, we still have some up in this safely locked up. But if you think about it, even with our own child, Ayla, she had so many toys.
That's true.
What did we do with all the toys? We got rid of them all.
Eventually, we provided them to someone else who can have as much joy from them as she could. That's the way I like to look at it. But she did have a lot of toys, and she enjoyed them while she had them.
No, she did, but
I hear what you're saying.
She also had an exorbitant amount, and think about how much.
Oh no, 100%. I'm not disagreeing.
Her education that could have gone.
I'm not disagreeing.
Some of those people had actually given her, a check. Now, so the point of providing ways for people to actually start planning for this as early as possible is so when they look at the plan that they may have had before the child came along, they can lighten the blow when you talk about, how your financial future may change. So let's talk about balancing your financial goals with parenting. Well, first, anyways, I feel like your plan should be reassessed on a yearly basis. Whatever you decided last year can sometimes get outdated. I think it's something that you should talk about yearly.
No, I agree with that, but I also agree that once you have a child, you have to find a balance between what your financial goals are and providing for the actual child. You should be looking at it from a yearly perspective. But let's say you decide, okay, well, you know what? On a yearly basis, I'm going to throw a number out. We're going to save 20% of our income, right? And all of a sudden, boom, baby comes along. And I said baby because I couldn't think of a name, so we're going to call it baby. Baby comes along, and baby has a price tag associated with it, and we love baby. The challenge is when baby comes along. Our earnings don't actually increase when baby comes along. So now we have an extra expenses, and we have to look at it. Okay, well, is it feasible for us to still put away 20% and still provide the life that baby deserves? And I'm not saying that it's not, but you really got to be able to start, finding that balance, because if you still want to put that 20% away and you want baby to have what baby needs, then maybe you can't get those haircuts that you get every 2-3 weeks. Maybe you got to start eating ramen noodles instead of going out for steak and lobster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you do have to continually adjust, but at the same time, you got to make sure you're finding that actual balance to make sure that your financial goals stay intact and you still provide what baby's going to need so baby can have the best life that baby should have.
Right. So
I'm going my next baby. I ain't having no more babies.
Well, one thing, I think you need to be realistic with your money too.
Oh, 100%. I think
what you can actually afford versus not.
I think I think you do need to be realistic. This goes back to that whole budget thing, but I think at the same time, not only being realistic, but you got to be committed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if your haircut costs $40 every time, it's not going to go down.
I'm going to tell you something.
It's going to go up.
Yeah, $40 ain't bad for a haircut. I mean, I don't pay nothing for mine, but $40 ain't bad for a haircut, because when you go to get your hair done, it's a lot more than $40.
Oh, most definitely. Well, I might be changing that partially, but we'll see.
No,
I'm not sure what the price tag's going to be though, but we'll see.
But you have to be committed. You have to make sure that you're willing to compromise. And you said it, you need to be realistic. And when I say realistic, I mean, if you think that you're going to be able to continue to do everything that you were doing.
Yes, that's unrealistic.
then that's not realistic, because something is going to actually suffer. And then rather than have something suffer, you said it, reassess, adapt, and compromise. So you make sure that from a goal perspective, you're committed to your goals, but at the same time, you are reallocating everything that you're doing so you can take care of whatever you need to take care of and still stay on the path that you had set out to reach your financial goals.
So, right. So one, obviously we already touched on it, is the budget, right? And being realistic with your budget. Like, just like with inflation and everything else, you got to inflate your budget. You know, the other thing is you really need to assess what your priorities are and what's really a want and a need. We did that quite often.
Yeah.
Is this a want or is this a need?
Sometimes I need the want.
Sometimes you think you need a new bike, but you understand it's only wanting a new bike.
I don't know if I ever used the phrase, I need a new bike. I've used the phrase, I want a new bike. I don't know if I've ever used the phrase, I need a new bike.
That was just a very loose example.
I'm going to sidestep for 1 second because I looked over here and I see my man. You're looking too far. I see did you see the picture I sent you?
No.
All right, never mind. Back on topic, because we're gonna need to wrap up soon. Yes, so you do have to start being realistic. You do have to start, reprioritizing what it is that you need to accomplish, looking at wants versus needs and all that other good stuff. That is the only way that you're going to be able to look at what you're trying to accomplish from a financial goal perspective and making sure that you take care of baby.
Yep.
So let's start to wrap this up. As I said in the beginning, raising kids can be an incredible journey. But it does come with a set of challenges, one of which is the financial responsibility. And as a parent, it's important that you prepare, because if you don't prepare, let me tell you something. Woo, listen.
Ramen every night.
I'll say this. As joyous as raising, as joyful as raising a kid can be, it can be a huge challenge also, and I'm not even talking about from the financial perspective. Now, take that challenge and throw in the challenge of not being prepared to handle all of the financial responsibilities or the financial aspects that come along with that. Oh, it makes it so much rougher. It just makes it so much rougher. So my advice is
that why you might downgrade from the 2-ply down to the 1-ply?
Nah, I ain't never doing that.
That's rougher.
Listen. Oh my goodness. I can't believe she just made that joke. Anyway, listen, my advice is create a budget and be financially responsible. You want to make sure that you can provide the best you can for your child while still approaching the financial goals that you set for your future. Now, let's get to my realization of the week. There was a quote that Wayne Gretzky said. He said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And I don't think that many people actually really think about what it is that he's saying. Don't let the idea of failure stop you from attempting to do something that you want to do.
Yeah.
You will fail 100% of the times that you don't actually make that attempt. So go out and reach for what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
That is the only way you're actually going to truly taste success. Success.
Well, there's another quote too that says, if you're not failing, you're not trying.
That is true. If you're not failing, you're not trying. And what we're trying to do is to wrap this episode up. So that's all for this week's conversation. Be sure to follow us and leave feedback on your favorite podcasting app. Thank you for listening, and be sure to join us for the next conversation.
That's it for this week's episode of the Lunch with Sandy podcast. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback and comments on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Lunch with Sandy. And be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us. Thanks again for listening to the Lunch with Sandy podcast.